call to order the November 3rd, 2021 Westlake City Schools special meeting of the Board of Education. Roll call.
Stoll.
Here.
Kraft.
Here.
Fanukin.
Here.
Lazinski.
Here.
Piernot.
Here.
Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion and a second to
So
approve the
moved.
agenda.
Second.
Roll call, Ms. Hopkins.
Kraft.
Yes.
Fanukin.
Yes.
Lazinski.
Yes.
Piernot.
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next up is the 5-year forecast presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Stoll. First off, I appreciate the Board of Education's ability to meet tonight and go over the 5-year forecast. As I said in the last meeting, there's a couple other resolutions that we'd like to address tonight that I'll get to in a little bit, but we're combining it with the 5-year forecast presentation. Just seemed like it would work out best. So under Ohio law, we are required to produce a 5-year forecast on an annual basis in the fall and submit it to the state of Ohio. It used to be by the end of October. Now it's by the end of November. Additionally, we are required to update that 5-year forecast in the month of May of each fiscal year. So for the submission of the fall forecast, I'm going to put up a little bit of a presentation here on the screen. And for the board, of course, but also for anyone who's out there in YouTube land, all of the documents are attached on board docs. So the presentation is attached during this 5-year forecast presentation piece, and all of the detail, including my forecast and assumptions, are attached in the resolution that I'm asking the board to approve tonight on the forecast. Obviously, we've gone through this before. This is my 6th fiscal year in the district, and I've kind of used the same format for the past several years of doing a presentation. I will say first and foremost, I've kind of struggled a little bit for tonight. Not as though I'm opposed to presenting it in this fashion in any way, but in my career, which is, like I said, now I'm in my 6th year at the district here as a sitting treasurer for almost 9 years, as working in the treasurer's office for 16 years. This is probably the most uncertainty that I have felt in working with a 5-year forecast, and there's 2 main reasons for that. One is the biennium budget bill changed the way school funding is done in the state of Ohio. And that has happened before in my career. That's not unusual. That can pretty much happen every 2 years. But this year, they've made some significant changes. And while they've put out a bunch of estimates that they had released with the biennium budget, in essence, they said, well, we're still interpreting the law and we'll have more details by October, and we'll implement it for our school funding in October. October has come and gone. They had probably in late September put out something and said, well, we're still working on that. We're now targeting the end of December. So we don't fully know how this is going to implement us. So a lot of it is some judgment calls based on the information that was released. It's not hard information that I would rather use when pulling from state reports. Additionally, we had our revaluation of the community, the 6-year update was released a draft of that, and you've seen that in the newspaper or in the media, and we've seen some significant increases in property values within Cuyahoga County area, including Westlake. And there's some uncertainty with that, as there's some challenges going on right now and will continue. And that does, while it does not have dramatic impacts on our revenue, as we've talked about many times before, House Bill 920, which says that even as valuation goes up, you can't collect more But we do have inside millage, and inside millage is not subject to House Bill 920. So as values do go up, there is a portion of your taxes that each of you here pay as residents on your home property values, and we're 5.8 mils of inside millage. And that if your property value goes up, you do pay a more based on that 5.8 mils. So not on the full amount that the school district collects, but on that 5.8 mils of inside millage. So there's some uncertainty that's laid out in it here. And unfortunately, we're not going to see clarity until probably the new year, and maybe even a little later, depending on when ODE fully implements the school funding formula. With that being said, we do have a solid history of in the district of being fiscally responsible, and that starts with the Board of Education and works through our superintendent and administrative team, and that has allowed us to maintain strong financial balances, strong fiscal stewardship, and transparency with the community through our audits and annual appropriations and spending. Looking at our history, one of the things that as a treasurer that I do is I typically am going to forecast for kind of the worst case scenario. We're going to forecast holding our revenues pretty much stagnant. Okay, it's just something that we try to do because we don't know with certainty what's going to happen with your revenues. At the same time, our expenditures, I've tried to be upfront with the community here, and we forecast 10% increases in insurance benefits. We forecast higher than normal spending on some of our purchase services or our supplies and materials. Again, we're saying that, hey, if things really go a little bit out of control and there could be legitimate reasons. I'm not saying that it's that this is not spending just to spend, but having legitimate reasons that we would need to spend it. I try to forecast for that. So what happens is our forecasts have seen over the years, we're kind of showing a deficit in year 5. And then each year we're kind of pushing that out another year. And this forecast, you're going to see that again. And so the forecast that I'm presenting here for the board that has been reviewed through our finance committee shows a unreserved cash balance in our 5th year of our forecast, fiscal year 2026. So this would be June 30th of 2026, being in negative about $5.3 million. I will certainly stand here right now and tell you that as long as the worst case scenarios don't come true, that's not going to happen. I've kind of taken a little bit of time to do what I guess the word would be introspective on myself and my forecasting. I kind of looked back at some of my forecasts, and we kind of see this because even an example would be in a 5-year forecast is, let's say we over or underestimate our ending reserve unreserved cash balance by $2 million. Well, over that 5 years, that's $10 million that would be under accounted for in the forecast by the end of the forecast. So it is a little bit of a challenge because we want to be conservative, but I don't want to cause panic or I don't want to cause the concerns, and that's why we've talked in our finance committee. That's why we've talked as a board that I'm committed to reviewing this on a quarterly basis so that we keep on top of it. But we want to be also look at the forecast and say, okay, hey, we know there's going to be some conservative pieces built in. We know that some of it's going to be worst case scenario, and I don't want to necessarily jump on a levy issue if there's not that need that we're going to see. So moving on from the main forecast page, I'll skip down to the next piece of it, and we kind of break it up in the pieces. And as I talked about our local taxes here, we are certified by the county for about $47.77 million at 100% collection rate. We're only at about 96.5% of a collection rate. So we forecast for a little bit lower than that. And that amount actually includes roughly $4.4 million that we get from the state of Ohio through reimbursements for homestead rollback, owner occupied credits. You have some homestead exemptions for people who have low income. So there's a number of pieces that we get on some state reimbursements on that. I don't forecast for new construction. I know what's happening around us. I can see it as I drive through the community, but we don't forecast it because we don't know exactly when it's going to come on the tax duplicate. So I don't include it in there. So you'll see that our forecasted revenues are, very anemic growth going in. The reality of it is we'll probably see a little bit higher of that, but I don't count it until we receive it. And then we'll certainly carry it going forward. But again, it's just a conservative approach to it. Moving on to the next one, we have our state grants. This is where things have changed. So I remember specifically Mrs. Lazinski a couple of years ago, as our board members go to Capitol Conference this time of year. I remember we had a conversation at dinner one evening about what type of school district we are. Are we a guaranteed district, or are we a per pupil district? Are you a capped district? There were these different type of districts in the old foundation formula program, and we were a guaranteed school district. And we were receiving about $3.4 million of unrestricted aid from the state. And a guaranteed district meant, the way that I like to phrase it, probably the state wouldn't say this, but the way I phrase it is they wanted to give us less, but by law, they couldn't. So they had set a arbitrary period. I think most recently it was 2017. And they said that you couldn't receive less than you received in 2017. And that was roughly that $3.4 million. So we were getting that $3.4 million. The pandemic dramatically changed that. We know that. We saw that in fiscal year 2020. Instead of going from that 3.4 million, we were down to around 2.7, 2.8 million. And we had that again in 2021 as we saw the cuts from the state of Ohio to school funding directly tied to the coronavirus pandemic. I'm carrying $2.8 million going forward because that under the new state funding formula, that's roughly what we were projected to receive going forward. So that's lower than that 3.4 million. Okay. So on our revenue wise, we will see less from the state. Okay. I'm going to talk about expenditures in a little bit, but on revenue wise, we'll see a decrease $600,000, or I'm projecting it right now about $600,000 less from the state. The second line that we show on there is our restricted grants and aid. This specifically is tied to what's called catastrophic costs. Catastrophic costs are costs related to students with special needs or exceptional needs, where they may be attending programs that are right for them, that may not be in the district, out of district tuition. And for students based on their specific need, the state says that you should be paying at least X number of dollars. And that changes for different way they categorize those specific needs. And when you go above and beyond, you can request reimbursement from the state. A good example is last year, we requested around $1 million that we had spent above and beyond and identified those to the state of Ohio. They only set aside a pot of money. They don't tell us how much it is. And they then receive the requests from all the school districts, and then they divvy it out based on how many school districts put in for the money, and also based on your state share index. Again, they view how wealthy they view you. We're a 5% state share index. So we received very little of that, only about $87,000 of that over $1 million that we put in for it. So we don't, it's not a one-to-one reimbursement. It's nothing like that, but we do jump through the hoops to try to recover some additional funds from the state, but it's not a whole lot, but it's something. Other revenue, we talked about the property tax allocation. That's that homestead rollback that I spoke about earlier. And then we also have some other revenue. We've seen the most growth over the past few years. I'm estimating it conservatively around 1.9 million. One of the big things that we have done over the past 5 years is we've been more aggressive in working with mostly our business communities who have filed for tax reductions or property value reductions. And we've worked through what's called payment in lieu of tax agreements, pilot agreements, where they might be challenging their property value, and an attorney on behalf of the district will go to their attorney and say, hey, can we come to an agreement that, the district, you'll pay the district what, either all or a portion of what we would lose if it goes down, and we'll drop the case going back, challenging that property value. We've been able to do a number of those agreements to not necessarily increase our revenue, because it doesn't increase our revenue, but it protects our revenue, because these are generally businesses that are first filing for reductions. So if they receive the reduction, we would lose revenue. So we're going and saying, hey, what can we do on an out-of-court settlement so that we can maintain our revenue as much as possible. Moving on to expenditures, we're a people business. Okay, plain and simple, we're a people business. We don't create widgets. We don't, we're not selling products. We are educating students of this community. And in order to do that, we need to have educators and people to support them within the district. So obviously our largest expenditures are going to be salary and benefits. And so you'll see a breakdown of each of the kind of the three areas: the administrative and exempt, that's the support staff for the administrative positions. We have our certified, which is our teachers, and we have our classified, which is our support staff. You'll see a breakdown of each of their kind of a broad overview of their gross salaries. This year, fiscal year 22 that we're in, 23 and 24, we had negotiated contracts with both unions at 1.95% increases each of the years plus steps. So I estimate that to be roughly 4% annually in overall salary increases. After that, I'm showing a 3% increase as just using a number. It's a number pulled out of thin air, but it's a number that I'm comfortable with using. It could be higher, it in theory could be lower, but it's going to be somewhere around there. Additionally, we're seeing where, benefits, we had no increase last year. We're actually closer to 3% this year as an increase, but I'm still carrying a 7% increase, because we do have some changes in staff. You might have people go from single to family, or you have somebody who picks up insurance who hadn't picked it up in the past. So I'm showing a 7% increase this year, a little bit of hedging there. And then, as I said, I carry a 10% increase each year thereafter. The one thing I do want to point out here, because when we look at salaries, I know some people will say, oh, well, you keep giving raises or you keep doing things like this. In fiscal year 2013, the board had actual salary costs across the district for, administrative, certified, classified, of $32,580,200. This year, fiscal year 2022, I'm estimating it at $32,552,232. Each of the years from fiscal year 14 to fiscal year 22, we have remained under that amount that we had in salary and benefits in fiscal year 13. The commitment of the Board of Education, the superintendent, and the administrative staff has worked hard, and the community support has added to that. An example would be in consolidating the elementary schools. We saw a benefit of about $1.6 million in savings in salary. So by the community support, by the leadership of the board and the superintendent, we've been able to maintain under that amount really for the past 8 years or so. And I think that's pretty impressive, as if I would ask you, Mr. Kraft, in the financial world, where we've seen inflationary or cost of living increases over the past 8 years, I would probably promise you it's above zero.
You got it.
Right now, we're below zero right now over that 8-year period.
Right.
So that has been working with our staff. The staff at one point took not only a step freeze, but they took a salary reduction. And that has helped maintain that fiscal stewardship over these past number of years. Moving down, we have purchase services. And it's kind of ironic because for the past several years, I've carried this right side column showing purchase services of community school deductions, open enrollment deductions, scholarship deductions. I would update it each year as for the new year and have estimates in there. Going back to the state funding changes, one of the changes they made is they said, again, we haven't seen it implemented yet, but they said that these 3 specific deductions that we were paying as expenses, so we received a higher revenue, but then this money was being taken out directly before we got the revenue. Okay, so we'd have to book the higher revenue, but then we had to book these expenses. And these expenses are, $800,000 last year. You'll see in fiscal year 19, they were closer to $900,000. Apparently, we're no longer going to be charged these expenses directly. That the state will handle these type of expenses and pay these schools, community schools, open enrollment schools, or schools that are receiving the scholarship and scholarship deductions are tied directly to either autism scholarship or what's called John Peterson Scholarship, again, for students with identified special needs. And we're no longer gonna have to pay for those. So because it hasn't been fully implemented, I haven't really forecasted it in here yet. So again, we're hedged a little high. You'll see for the past couple of years, we've seen our purchase services decreasing in costs. Now, some of that was tied to the pandemic as we had buildings closed in 2022. We've kind of limited some of our costs in 2021. So we're going to see some creep up, but if we don't have to pay this $800,000 or $900,000 in those 3 purchase service areas, that will reduce our purchase services pretty significantly. So there's more to come on that, and I hope to have that update, or I definitely will have the update in May, and hope to have a interim update to the board once we receive more information. We also have some supplies and equipment and other objects. These are obviously in the grand scheme of a $50+ million budget, are smaller level items. You'll see I carry about $1.5 million a year for supplies and materials, although the past couple of years we've been closer to $1 million. We are carrying about $575,000 for capital outlay. And you'll see specifically with, not specifically, but the board had directed me to start looking at doing educational technology out of general fund instead of PI, as we were looking to do other projects with PI. So I've kind of upped that to where, if you look back to fiscal year 19, we were relatively low at only about $135,000 in capital outlay. So we've got $400,000 in educational technology, and then the rest is for capital outlay, mostly through the business office for things that don't quite necessarily fit under PI, but still have needs for the district. Finally, what does this all mean? Again, I want to go back to, I don't know, maybe it's been about 15 minutes ago when I started this. I want to go back and say that, I'm very conservative in our forecasting. And while our forecast shows a nosedive on our unreserved cash balances, I don't think that's actually what's going to happen. Again, I commend the Board of Education, the superintendent, the administrative staff for the fiscal stewardship. And as we're able to maintain that fiscal stewardship, as we're able to, and again, that's not taking away opportunity. We're not talking about cutting things. We're just saying that we want to analyze things and do what's in the best interest of the district. We're able to maintain those balances and kick this out, maintain positive cash balances longer, going forward. Again, are we going to be on the ballot at some point in the near future? Yes. Is it obviously we weren't on the ballot yesterday? Do I think we're going to be on the ballot in fiscal year 2022? At this time, I couldn't recommend that to you. There would be no value in me recommending that to you. Certainly, we could talk if the board would want to do that, but based on this information that I have, I would not recommend it to the board. But we want to look at, again, we want to maintain it, and we want to analyze it quarterly through our finance committee, bringing it information to the board, seeing where things are at. And if we're able to maintain a surplus or only slightly going into deficit spending, you probably would be, a couple or several years out before we really would want to take our first swing at a ballot initiative. So that's the forecast, the nuts and bolts of it. I'm happy to answer any questions. So please feel free to ask.
If I may, Mr. Hopkins, you started out telling us that, and I don't want to I don't want to guess at what your words were, but initially you said you had either the most uncertainty or the most concern.
That's the most uncertainty.
The most
you know,
uncertainty.
Yep.
Okay.
We're in an uncertain environment right now.
Right.
As we're waiting to see the foundation formula implemented. And we're waiting to see the finalized numbers of the revaluation.
Of the reval. Got it. Okay. And that of course is on revenues coming into the district, but not necessarily concerned about expenses. And that's primarily because, again, with being conservative, the way that the district has been running the district, an example that you gave was the building and opening of the new elementary school and shutting down 4 other elementary schools. We've had some savings and our expenses are not a concern and certainly not uncertain.
So, the expenses, the reason I'm more comfortable with the expenses is we have a certain level of control.
Mm-hmm.
If we feel the expenses are getting out of whack in areas, we're able to address it to some extent. Okay. Obviously, if insurance benefits would go terribly out of whack, we have some limited control as they're negotiated benefits, but we do have some level of control. Revenue, we have no control. We're completely reliant on our community, on the county who collects it from the community, and a little bit from the state of Ohio that they put in some of it as well. So revenue is always my bigger concern and the most uncertainty that's presented.
Thank you.
I have no questions. I just have a comment. I like the idea of the quarterly review of the 5-year forecast. It keeps this thing focused and in our minds. And I think that you did an excellent job, and we'll look at this again in another 3 months or so.
Thank you.
My one question is, you had mentioned on the dip in the supplies and materials in 2020 and 2021. Is some of that a little bit due to the pandemic?
Definitely, yes. Okay. We had an example would be closing the buildings in March of 2020. We didn't need supplies for whether it's cleaning supplies or classroom supplies for the rest of the year. Same thing last year. We had opened in a hybrid environment. We were using less supplies in the classroom. We had federal funds that were helping offset some of the additional money for cleaning that we were doing. So we didn't see that kick up like we might have expected going back to because it wasn't a normal year. But now we're really back to, dare I say, as normal as we could be at this time. And we have students in school 5 days a week. Our classrooms are running with similar activities as they had pre-pandemic. And the reason I say that is you might have had science classrooms that didn't do experiments or dissections last year because being on hybrid environments or not being able to certainly wouldn't want to do it virtually and for students with virtual learning. So we're more in a normal environment this year. So I think it will peak up a little bit. Even 1.4 I think is a little bit high, but we have it there right now. I think the bigger challenge we face in general is just like all of us in our own lives is, you've got some supply issues overall and your supply chain that we're not quite, things that we might order might be 6 months out. And, once we cross over to the new year, we might be ordering supplies that we might not get in this fiscal year. So you may see a artificially low amount in supplies and materials because we didn't receive them.
Are we also seeing any changes in supply prices going up, especially food costs for?
We absolutely are. We're seeing increases. I think all of us, again, in our personal lives or anyone watching this, we've seen, go out to a restaurant or go to Home Depot or go to, the grocery store. We're seeing increases in cost, inflationary increases. Again, I think overall we have enough cushion that we're able to cover that in this forecast without it being having an additional negative effect. But it will impact us. There's no lie about it.
Especially regarding with it being free lunches now for any student. How have we been doing financially, revenue wise? Because I know the money we make is off of the snacks, really.
A good amount.
But we've
Yeah. So, the majority of our money, I won't necessarily say just on the snacks, because and I'm just playing semantics at this point, but you know, a lot of the money was made on, I'll call them extras.
Yeah.
It might be a student, a high school student who wants 2 hamburgers instead of 1. It might be, you know, additional milks, or certainly, you know, we have snacks available for, you know, students, whether it's chips or fruit snacks or things of that nature. But there was a good amount of money, you know, made through there. Right now, we're holding our own based on the reimbursements that we're receiving through the federal government, and we are doing some sales of those additional items. And so we are seeing revenue coming in, local revenue coming in at the cash register. So right now we are holding a cash balance. I am monitoring that closely because, as we're fully aware, the board did do a transfer last year, and that's obviously not our first. I don't want it to be our first response, but you know, so we are monitoring that. But right now we're holding our own. I'll put it that way.
Okay, and same with athletics and link.
You know, athletics, we're working through some pieces on it. Athletics has better revenue this year than last year, as we were able to, if you remember last year for football season, they were limited to 2 or 4 tickets. It was really family only. You know, we didn't have student section. I mean, it was just I think at one of the games I was standing next to Dr. Goggin, you know, I just said, you know, this is just a weird atmosphere because it's so quiet and, you know, almost a morbid, you know, environment, because you just had people spread out apart and you just didn't have the normal sounds of a football game. And so this year it was nice to get back to, again, a sense of normalcy. So we did see our revenues increase in that. I've had one conversation so far with our interim AD, Mr. McGuire, and we'll continue those conversations. Dr. Goggin and I are speaking with WDAD tomorrow night, talking about some of the finances through athletics and school district. And then on Link, Mr. Waters has done an excellent job in being able to bring that program back into self-sufficiency. So far, so good with the Link program.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, thank you. Okay, next up is hearing of the public. Looking around the room, I don't see anybody. So we will move on to next item, which is treasurer's recommendations.
All right, so I have 3 recommendations. The first one is the forecast. I can go over it again if you no, no. So the first one is the 5-year forecast. I would ask the board if there's no further questions that we would approve the forecast. The other 2, we have Mr. Kosovar here, and I appreciate Mr. Kosovar joining us here tonight. I'm going to try to briefly touch on these, and then if there's questions from the board, Mr. Kosovar is our expert on these and can go into more detail on it. But the first one is authorizing the district to replace the 2 boilers at Leigh. So first and foremost, we recognize that Leigh is a relatively new school building. And we recognize that we have far higher expectations of the products that we buy to last longer than what now 9 years would be roughly. And this is not our initial reaction to this. And I want to make that very public. Mr. Kosovar, over the past 9 years, has been working with the manufacturer of the boilers as issues have continued to pop up over the 9-year period. We have on the boilers what's a very standard in the HVAC industry 10-year parts only warranty. And so as things have happened, we've been able to get parts replaced by the company, but we haven't necessarily, you know, we'd still have to have somebody come in and do the labor to repair the boiler or install those parts. Recently, one of the 2 boilers has essentially become beyond repair. Okay. And so Mr. Kosovar has worked with the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is recommending replacing the boilers, or at least that specific boiler. And they are, because it's still under that part of warranty, they're willing to prorate the price of a new boiler to roughly 50%. And that's based on these type of boilers are estimated at about a 20-year lifespan. These are not the old school cast iron boilers in the schools that I grew up in that, took up basically this entire room. These are essentially oversized file cabinets that are very similar to what you might have as like a tankless hot water heater that run water through a heat exchanger and heat it up very quickly and then send it out throughout the buildings. We looked into what our alternatives are. Could we file a suit against the company? And in researching it, we certainly could. And if the board would not approve this resolution, that may be an option that we would look to do. But it could be a expensive option to go, as well as a drawn out option to go. And while the boilers, we have 2 of them in the building, and each one is sized in a way that it could handle the building on its own. So with one boiler down, we still have another boiler going. That doesn't mean that school's going to be canceled or anything like that. It can do its job and heat the building. But if something happens to that boiler, then we truly are at a point where we would probably have to cancel school if you don't have heat in the building. And then at that point, how do you get heat back in a timely manner? Because we already have one that's dead, and it becomes a very costly endeavor as well in that piece. So the proposal here is to, working with the original manufacturer of the boiler, replace both of the boilers and buying the boilers at a prorated cost of roughly 50% to recognize the loss of the additional years that we would have had on the original boilers. And then working with a contractor, because the warranty doesn't cover, again, labor, okay? So we would work with a contractor to install the boiler, first demo the current boilers or uninstall the current boilers, do a little bit of pipe refitting, and then install these new boilers. The new boilers would come with, again, the standard 10-year parts only warranty. There is, and Mr. Co-Star, do you want to talk about the warranty a little bit? Because I know we talked about it this morning. There's some additional 1 year, I think, on it. Pieces of that.
Yeah, that's correct. So the contractor that would be installing the boiler would have a parts and labor 1 year warranty for that work to install it. The manufacturer then of the boiler would have its 10-year, and that is a graduated 10 years. So the first 6 years, it's at 100% of whatever the parts are, and then it goes down by 20% to the 10th year. Our current boilers, when we're experiencing these problems, the manufacturer had actually recognized that we were having such issues with it, that they were just giving us the replacement parts free of charge. They were trying to find a way to make these work to make it right for us. But after the last failure that we've had, they recognized that there was just no way that this would continue to operate for us for the balance of the 10 years, which is why we're seeking this.
And while in the resolution, you'll see that, this is declaring an emergency because of the time of the year that we're in, because the one boiler is not working at all. And essentially it's saying that we're going to forego competitive bidding. That does not mean that we're not doing due diligence to get the best price we can. And you've reached out to how many vendors to install?
I've reached out to 4 different vendors asking for the pricing for the demo and the reinstall of the boilers. The vendor that came in at the lowest quotation and completely understood the project, I actually walked through with them yesterday just to make sure that their number was good and that they could do all the work, was Bay Mechanical for a combined total of $99,900.
So while we have on here $120,000, we expect it to be more in the range of $100,000. I am asking for that 120 in case there would be an unforeseen circumstance that, I would not want to come back to the board and say, oh, it came in at 102 because we had to do X, Y, and Z and do another authorization. So we are working to get the best price, but this would allow us to move forward with working with Bay Mechanical to order the 2 boilers and then have them installed. Ideally, we would like to target an installation, if possible, around Christmas break. And if the timing works out, that'd be great. If not, we are tied to some of the supply chain challenges of getting the boilers here and the lead times that are right now estimated, I think, about 6 weeks.
About 6 weeks.
So, if everything goes well, we should be able to hit right around the end of the calendar year. But if something would tie us up, it might be a little bit later. But as long as the 1 boiler is still running, we're able to heat the building efficiently.
So I should tell my daughter to not break one of the boilers.
No, yeah, that's.
So 120,
No.
120 covers the service as well?
Yeah, so what would happen is we would work with, the recommendation of our attorney who wrote the resolution is to work with a single contractor to buy the boilers, demo the old, and install for a singular price. And so buying the boilers costs are roughly
$43,460.
for both boilers.
Jeez.
And 21 cents, right? No, that's-
Westlake.
But so the boiler cost, so out of that 100,000 or 99.9 that we're talking, the boilers, the actual physical boilers will cost 43,000. Normally, those boilers are going to be $85,000 plus. We're getting them at that roughly 50% cost. And then Bay Mechanical is charging, of course, for their labor, time, and materials is the other portion of that 99,000.
What's the brand?
It's a Bryan boiler, Bryan.
And is it the same brand as the old one?
It is the same manufacturer. It's a different version of a high efficiency condensing boiler. The boiler that we will be getting, it has been in manufacture for 5 years. In Ohio, they've sold roughly around 100 of these, and in the 5 years have had very little issues with them at all. The type of boiler that we had when we went through the middle school project has been having problems historically around through the manufacturer. They've recognized that it is an issue, and they've been trying to keep them working where they can.
And what is that brand?
It's still a Bryan
It is
boiler,
a
but it's a different version.
Got it. And
What's-
do
what's the
boilers take a lot of service? Like, does the district really have to be involved on a regular basis servicing that?
Absolutely. A matter of fact, as Mr. Hopkins has said, in the old days, a boiler was pretty easy. You turned it on, you opened the valves, you pumped the steam and hot water out to the rooms, and the thermostats did all the work. Nowadays, the new high efficiency condensing boilers have a lot of electronics, a lot of parts that are temperature sensitive. What we were experiencing in the old boilers were a lot of damage to our tubes and tube sheets. They're the parts that actually separate the hot gases and the water to boil and to heat. And when that failure happens, sometimes it can be catastrophic, where it just completely breaks or ruptures part of it. And that's what we actually had occur.
Thank you.
So what's the difference between the ones we're replacing? When you say they're the same brand, are there differences?
Yes, so it's the same manufacturer, a Bryan. Our old boilers were a BT 200. It's a flex tube boiler. It uses a different technology to achieve its efficiencies. We're getting what's called a BFIT 2000. It uses less tubes and actually has more of a drum, as Mr. Hopkins has said. It's more like a hot water heater, where it actually heats the surrounding water around the drum to create our heat for our building.
And do we anticipate less maintenance?
The maintenance will probably still be the same, because with any boiler annually, you'll have to clean the combustion area. You'll have to have a certified person come in to make sure that the gas to air ratios are correct. So we're burning nice and lean versus heavy. And so that it's clean inside for water, for scale in the water.
Other questions about resolution B here?
Obviously, we know that we're going to be able to, if the board agrees to it, we know that we're going to be able to fix this thing and keep our kids in school, and more than likely it's going to take place over Christmas break, and we feel comfortable with that time frame.
I actually walked the contractor through. He knows that we want to replace one, get the new one in, up and running before we dismantle the second one and then sequence to that one.
Awesome, thanks.
And that's a great point. Thank you for bringing that up. So the overall project will take far beyond Christmas break. Because it is going to be sequenced where if the board would approve this, we could issue a PO to them. They could start demo on the initial one anytime while we're ordering the new one to come in. But the new one will then need to be installed, will need to be started up, will need to be commissioned, okay? And we want to make sure it's fully functional in every way before we turn off the second boiler and start the demo of that one.
Helpful, thanks.
We have them in stock. Do we have to wait months?
They build these as you order them. That's why the lead time of around 6 weeks.
All right, I'll move on to recommendation C, if that's okay.
Yes.
So C I have on here is a resolution. Specifically, this is done in a way that by recommendation of legal counsel, that would be a safety and security measure, authorizing us to enter into contracts of up to $100,000 to do some work that at the Dover campus. Without rehashing conversations that we've had over the past several months, we recognize the need to help with the traffic patterns at Dover campus, as well as providing for greater safety and security of our students in the drop-off and pickup areas, and separating out our car traffic and bus traffic. What this resolution would allow us to do is 3 specific projects that we've identified at the Dover campus. One would be to extend the sidewalk along the drive that we've used as a drop-off or a bus drop-off, which is just, what would that be, east of the building itself or east of the main entrance?
It would be east of the main entrance.
So it's kind of, there's a sidewalk there now in front of that parking lot.
It's in the parking lot.
Yeah, it's in the parking lot. So it's, there's a sidewalk there now. It would be extending it around the curve, which is really the area in front of DIS. So we would extend the sidewalk there. We would also take out a little bit of an island that is currently with the parking lot there, a curbing island, so cars would have easier access. The second piece would be allowing us to contract to install roughly 450 feet.
Yes.
450 feet of fence in that next to that sidewalk area. This would allow students to be dropped off on one side of the in the parking lot by cars. The fencing would then funnel our students to 2 main walkways in front of the main entrances to Leigh and DIS, and then have our buses in the roadway, effectively separating our cars and buses, and allowing for our students to cross in front of the buses in safe identified zones where we can, again, have greater control to maintain that safety. The third piece would be installing the electrical needs and the automated or electronic traffic gates at the Bassett Road entrance, and then at the end of that entrance by the parking lot, so that we can control usage of that Bassett Road entrance throughout the day. We would use it in a way that we've used it for the past number of years for drop off in the morning and pick up in the afternoon. But other than that, it could be timed so that we don't have to worry about having staff go out there and remember to close a gate or open a gate at certain times, but they would be automated, very, very similar. In fact, they're the same gates that are currently at the elementary school campus that we've used for the past year now effectively. So it would allow us to do those 3 things. Again, it allows us to forego bidding. It does not mean that we are just going to go out and find the first person willing to do it. Mr. Kosvar has been very good, has gotten multiple quotes or at a minimum requested multiple quotes, although sometimes it's hard to find some bidders. But we've done everything we can to get pricing as best we can. Currently, we stand at pricing of
Currently, it's at 79,000, sorry. $79,098.
so we're under $80,000. Again, I'm asking for authorization for 100,000, again, for unforeseen circumstances, but the resolution clearly identifies that the three pieces that we would be doing with this money would be the sidewalk, the additional sidewalk, the fencing, and the automated gates.
And we're comfortable with the traffic pattern that we're creating. And we haven't modeled it though, right?
What do you mean by modeled? Have we worked with like a traffic engineer on it?
This is the same traffic pattern that we've got now.
So just to point out.
So we have modeled it and
Yes.
it works. Okay.
Yeah.
And the gates for a layman taking a look at the elementary school and what will be the new gates at the Dover campus, they would see them as pretty much the same.
Same type of gate, yes.
Right. And one thing that comes to mind, the automation of it, I know, for example, over the summertime when we weren't using those gates at all, but the art festival was going on, Dr. Gallion needed to raise a gate. He was able to do that pretty quickly, pretty easily. We're going to be able to do the same.
Absolutely. These gates will have the ability to have a keyed switch on it. Any staff member could go up there and keep them open until the event's
Thank you.
finished.
Can they be controlled remotely as well?
No, these are not. They are on timers. And the only remote aspect they have to it, to clarify, we do have for our service vehicles, like a garage door opener
Right.
type button that will allow them to open and close.
Proximity.
And all correct. And then also for our safety forces, our police have the same type of controller in their cars. And they also have a chirp mode, which will allow an ambulance or a fire truck with the siren on to allow it to open with the chirp.
And they're set at the gate, the timers and stuff.
They're set at the gate, correct.
So
I noticed that there's work done on the crosswalk already there on Bassett Road.
Correct.
Was that city?
It
Yeah.
it was
So
a
the city's
joint,
doing it.
right?
The city's physically doing the work. The city's physically doing the work because they manage the roads and they'll put the crosswalk in. We purchased the
actual
the
pedestrian
actual
flashing.
pedestrian device.
Right.
That's going in.
But they did the street markings and they did the curbing.
so if a gate needs to be open because for whatever reason someone forgot to,
Yeah.
an actual person has to go to the gate.
That is correct. And that's exactly how it operates over at the elementary school right now.
That's kind of what we're doing today.
Correct.
Mhm.
But these would be, you would only have to send a person as an exception. It would not be the rule. So right now, where we've been, and where we have, and I don't want to use this in a dramatic way, but where we have failed over the past number of years is we should have been going out, per our agreement, we should have been going out there and opening it and closing it at certain times throughout the day. And because life happens, that didn't happen every day or on necessarily a regular basis. So they were being left open a lot more often. While these gates are not internet enabled to where we can open them from our phone or something like that, if there's an event at the building and when we have events, we have custodial staff, maintenance staff available. And if there's a need to have those open for those events, they can walk out there and key them open and they'll stay open until they're keyed shut.
Because unlike the elementary school, Dover campus, especially the Burness, you have a lot of events take place there. High school events take place there, junior high events take place there, practices take place there. Lots of things take place in that back. So there's a lot of exceptions potentially. And I understand. And the reason it worked so well before is because the gate was always open. So
The
don't get me wrong.
default's it's been closed this year,
Well, yeah,
except for,
in past years.
correct. But this year I can definitely tell you it's been closed except for Halloween party for DIS for pickup was in the back. There's been a few exceptions, but it's been predominantly closed, in particular, like going to soccer games. You have to go in the front and drive all the way around back. It's been closed and so parents are adjusting to it.
Yeah, I guess.
And I think our neighbors have been appreciating it.
Though I am happy to hear that the chirp mode will work with the ambulances, because that was an issue. I know at one soccer game where they showed up to go in the back and they couldn't, so.
And they will be on timers as well.
Correct.
So they'll be automatically during the times that we set them, going up and down.
And I guess with the timers during say fall season, but you know, there's always going to be either soccer or there's going to be football, 7th, 8th grade football practicing over there. So obviously no one's going to start practicing after 8. So maybe at certain times during the year, you know, it doesn't have to close at 4 and then open up at 6 for practice and then close at 8. Maybe you could just stay open after school until what would normally be the end of activities and stuff. I just worry about creating a bigger inconvenience than it's going to create as a way of maintaining safety and honoring our commitments to the neighbors.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, should we do these one at a time, or you want to group them all together?
What do you think? What do you want to do?
I think we should do the 2 and 3 individually, because they're different. They're different items, right?
Yes, yeah, I mean, again, with it only being 3, we could lump all of them together, or if you'd like to separate them, we might as well do all just 3 separate.
Yeah, let's do 3 separate.
Okay,
Okay, so we need a motion and a second.
I move to approve the 5-year forecast.
Second?
Roll
Oh,
call.
did you make a motion?
Any, what's that?
I made a motion.
No, she made. You
let's
guys
make a motion. I have you as a second.
Both were at the same time. I was saying, who got it?
I heard John first.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, roll call, Ms. Cochran.
If you're not,
Yes.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes,
Stoll,
Yes.
motion carries.
Next up, we need a motion in the second.
For
Okay.
4B,
Motion for 4B.
Second?
Any other further discussion?
This is obviously a good thing for us to do, especially for the staff and everything. I do want to go back though to 4A. The 5-year forecast is a very large thing to do, and I give Mr. Hopkins and his team lots of credit for being able to put those things together, because there is a lot of detail associated with the budget based on the school size. So there's a lot of work goes into that. So thank you.
Any other discussion?
Happy we're trying to find a way to make sure we keep heat in the building.
Very good. Okay, hearing no other discussion, roll call.
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
Lizinski,
yes,
if you're not,
Yes.
Stoll,
Yes.
motion carries.
Last item is 4C, the resolution for the Dover campus. I need a motion and a second.
so moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Lizinski,
Yes,
Fanukin,
Yes.
Kraft,
Yes.
if you're not,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yeah.
Motion carries.
The next item up is general board comments. Do you have any?
drove through Bassett, the old Bassett building. Wow. I mean, it's a beautiful green grassy area. It's hard to believe that there's a school there once before, but looks very nice.
Do we have timing on when electrical is being reconnected for the street lights or the parking lot lights? I've gotten some questions on that.
Yes, so CPI has the work order to install or reconnect the lighting to our current lights. They told me it was gonna be at the time about 8 to 10 weeks, and that puts it around the end of November.
Okay,
So patiently waiting for that, and as soon as they're ready to go, we'll have one last item to put on the pole, which will be a photo cell, so that we could have the lights come on at the right time.
okay.
And there's still a sign by the road that says future.
Yeah.
That needs to probably
Yeah,
be
Future
removed.
home of
So
Future
that's-
home.
Park.
Yeah, right. So that's actually an interesting thing, because yes, we need to take that down, but also we probably would need to talk about, should there still be a Bassett Elementary sign when there's no Bassett Elementary School? So.
What about just like Bassett Park?
Well, we could talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
that,
can
but-
just take it down.
So we
Bassett
could do
Park.
things
Yeah.
like that, yeah.
Some people will get confused, especially
Of
on
course.
GPS.
Yes.
Where's the building?
Yeah.
Any other comments?
Any other further thoughts talking about Bassett? Any further thoughts about Holly Lane?
That's, Holly Lane is something, that's a building that is definitely on our radar to come down next.
Okay.
And I know having Dave here is a good opportunity as well. There was another water break
There was.
there that we did end up repairing. Just in case we want to kind of do anything with it and decide it. Definitely leaning towards taking it down, but we haven't gotten to a point where we've shut everything off to where it can't be maintained. So,
Any thought on timing when we should make that decision?
well, we probably wouldn't do it until summer, would be
Okay.
my guess, spring,
Right.
summer. We are doing a training there, actually.
Safety force?
We are doing a safety force training. We're doing a safety force training in November, a tabletop with WPD and WFD. It's going to be a coordinated
Nice.
event. And then in May, we are going to do a full-scale safety training on that site. WPD has indicated that they will definitely alert everybody in the neighborhood, so they realize as vehicles are going in and there's activity there, that it is a training exercise. But so we would say that we probably would wait until summer, because we already have a training in May plan.
Okay.
Is asbestos remediation going to need to happen at that site?
It will need to happen.
Okay, before-
The abatement.
Yeah, or abatement, thank you.
I had the opportunity, along with Ms. Prunat, Dr. Goggin, join Principal Woods for another visit of the field house and got a clear picture of goals for that. So just to share that a desire to, we absolutely want to keep the gym. And the idea that we would build another locker room area that would include restroom, but I got a much better picture of that. I know it's something that we're going to continue to talk about, but I have a clearer picture. Principal Woods has already begun cleaning out and clearing out and making the gym available, which was neat to see. We were contacted by CAC. They do plan on bringing a couple more members onto CAC, so they'll present those to us soon. We've had the discussion before about games and potentially fans, even our own fans, and maybe going beyond where they should from an emotion and from a statement. And it's hard to call it cheering when it seems to be so negative and sometimes pretty vulgar. I had a good experience at the boys soccer game against Shaker, and some of our own fans were getting a little out of control and dropping some words, yelling some words across the field that they shouldn't. And I just think about the presence of a board member, a principal, our own new athletic director, and just really calling out that behavior and how people stop and they look and they think, and it doesn't happen again. But Mr. McGuire and I really engaged together as a good tag team, and just how some small action can really change a lot of behavior. And I think that we're responsible to engage in some of that. One last thing, when it comes to financial literacy, I think we provide financial literacy and some of those new requirements. Do you anticipate that we'll have to change curriculum in any
I
way?
don't think so.
Okay. I figured that we were
Yeah.
really providing all of that already, but that's good to know. Thank you.
I'm curious, what did the principal Wood goal to keep the gym?
What did he what?
What was his goals to keep the gym as a gym?
So
Considering we have.
Is
a
that
lot.
heated? The
it
field
is,
house?
the field house is heated, it's just not air conditioned.
Okay,
So I will tell you that as Mr. Kraft indicated, we did go visit, we went through and Dave was drawing out different ideas about locker rooms. But it is something that I think it will continue to evolve. We're going to look at, we know we want the gym space, that you're 100% right. But even as we just stood there last week, we're saying, should it be the hard floor gym? Should we be looking at turfing that and creating a field house where you can take baseball practice, like infield, like different type of things. So we're really gonna engage our athletic organizations and others to talk about it and see, does it remain just the regular hardwood floor gym where, you can do basketball, volleyball, and all the activities inside there, or does it become like a training facility, for speed training, drills, indoor soccer type things, and that sort of thing. So
What are your thoughts on that?
what condition is the floor in now?
very good. It's in very good condition.
I just needs a little cleanup.
It does, just if you sand
Sand
it
it
the
down,
wire.
surface
it
it.
look brand new problem. Not concerned. Obviously, we all know, we have a fantastic gym and a huge aux gym. That, and at times it does get doubled up. Because there are so many off-season programs that the different sports will have. So I mean, there might be times people running around the track with the nets down and people inside doing different things. So I mean, I get that. And especially in Cleveland's weather, it's tough to try and get an early head start on some of that stuff. But when you said gym, I just thought basketball gym versus what you elaborated on. I mean, I think if it could turn into a multi-purpose type facility with locker rooms, so that we have visitors or what have you, opposing teams and things like that. I think that would be something.
So we have a lot more work to do on this. But when we look at the amount of space we have for locker rooms, we're not quite sure, so having Mr. Shaw at the high school now, he visited Westlake as a coach and would bring a football team here to play. And he said when the locker rooms that we have in the high school are so small that they would put just their stuff in the locker room and then meet in the hallway. And so we kind of took that into consideration as we went and we're bringing more and more stakeholders in. And his point was, if we create 2 locker rooms in that area, they would be so small that both would be unusable. So one of the things that he was sharing was, if we keep one of the locker rooms larger, so it could be the home locker room. And one of the things that he indicated is that many places that they would go, he said, we don't need a locker room. We don't change here. We usually show dress. We're not going to shower here. Said, if we have access to the restrooms, and even if you can come into the gym, and even if you drop the curtain, so it's like a half a gym type of thing, it's like we can sit and do everything. A lot of schools actually set up that portion of a gym. So on Friday nights, the team can come in and just be in there. So we're still looking at, when we say locker room, I think when we talk about a visitor's locker room specifically, we think about it being this NFL type or different professional sport locker room, where you really don't have your visiting teams unpacking and staying here. It's really just more of a space.
Yeah.
So we're investigating all of those. We don't have, something. We need to engage some other folks and to be able to go visit some sites and kind of see how we can really maximize that space, because it's beautiful. when we look at what other people are building right now, what we're considering building for a garage, like the steel structure to increase storage on the other end of the end zone, that's what people are using to build their field houses and different things they're doing. We have a really beautiful structure there, and it's right by the stadium. It's right by the high school on that campus, and we think we have a really nice opportunity it may not be exactly everything we want, because with it being a beautiful brick structure, we are restricted a bit by its size, but what is the best way we can maximize that location, that space, and everything we have there? So it is for multiple sports, and we're looking at that.
Yeah, I think using the phrase locker room is probably just not appropriate anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's more of how can we turn this into a multi-purpose facility for home teams, visiting teams, such that it's a place if they need, before a game at halftime to go instead of
Sitting
off,
out in the field.
instead of standing off to the side,
Yeah.
or even during construction, they have porta potties on the other side of the field with tents during that. So anything that we could do to make our visitors feeling welcome and giving them an opportunity to sit.
What
I
are
will
some of the
say is-
other facilities in the conference? Have the coaches or principals visited some of those? Obviously, the coaches.
They've experienced them. I mean, they've gone and experienced them and are you talking about locker rooms? or-
Well, yeah, for the away team, when we visit, what
Yeah.
kind of facilities do they provide for the away team? And
Well, a lot of schools will, when they built their stadium, they built it underneath.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I don't understand why Westlake didn't do it.
so they're not open underneath the stadium.
Right,
They're
yeah, a lot of them are
closed up.
closed up and there's the
have-
restrooms are there, the locker rooms are there. Well, that is something maybe we could think about. Either tear down the old stadium, build a new one, or retrofit it. Put lockers right in there with what Dr. Goggins said, some sheet metal.
Barb, I think to your point, I think about a football team and some nasty weather. They just want a home base to leave their stuff. Not necessarily a locker room. You're not going to do showers or
Right,
lockers,
no,
but a
right.
place to leave your stuff, place out of the elements to meet
Sit
briefly at
and-
halftime,
It's-
grab your stuff at the end of the game and go. And today we really don't have that, except for, heading all the way into the high school.
Yeah.
So keep those in mind and. bring your
Because I
ideas.
walk over to the football games
Mhm.
and because of where my house is and I walk over, I end up going around the back end and seeing the back end. Most of the times I will tell you whether it is chairs that they drag out and the teams just move the chairs around, whether we're talking the home team or the away team. Or I've even seen them using the bleachers over by the baseball field. And just meeting, especially if it's nice, like I get when the weather's miserable or very cold, they're gonna wanna go inside. But I've definitely been seeing a lot of that. And where they just really want a place to sit and talk.
Maybe we could build a pavilion out there or something.
We're still looking at it. We'll
Okay, any other
Get
comments,
those
discussion?
outdoor heaters.
Mr. Kraft and I had a wonderful opportunity to see the new DIS pollinator garden that we had a couple of our staff members working with a team of students to design and put out. And had a wonderful opportunity to go to the National Honor Society installation,
Thanks.
induction ceremonies, I should say, and that was really a lovely event as always. And in slight contrast to when the varsity soccer game that you went to one, I think the week before, and I'm sorry, I don't remember which game they were playing. And I gotta say, the spectators were really polite and respectful. And so much so that in the beginning of the game, the PA system went out and during the national anthem and everybody just started singing to finish it off. Picked up without a beat and it was really kind of impressive. There was no pause, like next thing you know, everybody just finished it off.
Was that a soccer game?
As soccer did.
A girls?
No. So it went really well. And congratulations to the girls cross-country team who are competing in state. And I believe there's some boys individually competing for states. I can't remember with cross country.
Yeah.
And that volleyball game and the soccer game were hard losses.
And congratulations to our superintendent, who's part of the dream team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, thank you.
Going back to the unruly fans. I really, and most of the time they're fine. The events I've attended, it hasn't been bad. I did not feel happy about the note that we got that our own athletes were rude. And I mean, there's got to be something that the coaches would do for education and, with their for their teams. But and I did mention to all of you that at OSBA one year, I did attend one of the sessions that dealt with fans that would yell at the umpires and the referees. And I think right now there's a shortage of
Yes.
referees and umpires. So I don't think we should continue to let something like that happen if we're aware of it. I think we need to nip it in the bud so that we don't get the reputation of being a school that allows that to continue.
Thought it was interesting at the volleyball game Saturday, there were some calls that were not in the favor of Westlake that spectators were not happy with. And then there was a call made, a couple calls in a row that spectators on the other team were very much not happy with, and their reaction was, it was a little alarming.
So I'm sorry, go ahead.
So it was interesting to see sort of how it.
Now, you mentioned OSBA and looking at the agenda, the different items, Monday, 9 a.m., they're doing another one of those. So
Yes.
there is a session that we're looking at.
Who's conducting it, do you know?
Like Bale?
Oh,
Something
gosh.
Bale.
Yes, I have to look I can't remember who's doing it. It's not what.
It's not
the same
Revere.
that you were
It was
thinking.
Revere School System,
Yeah.
that the athletic director.
Mhm.
They had a very nice procedure that they followed. And he was a very large football player from Indiana.
It's
And
Mike
he would, as we said, how do you, who takes the responsibility of going up to talk to these unruly fans? And he said, well, he does. He goes and stands right by them and then he talks to them. But they had, you were allowed you were talked to the first time. The second time it happened, you were asked to leave and you weren't allowed to participate or, come to any more events. And then the third time it happened, you were totally kept out from all sporting events for the remainder of the school year. So, I mean, they definitely had a protocol that they followed. But it'll be interesting.
I think the simple thing Mr. McGuire and I did was just what you said, call it out, stood near those, and, the rest of the game was fine. And I think if it's not called out, if it's allowed and it will just continue, it gets
Right.
worse. Sometimes that transfers to the field because some of those things are communicated to a son or daughter on the field and they start to get a little chippy as well. And it just, if you're able, as you said, you nip
Nip
it.
it in the bud because it
And,
creates a
it's
culture
done.
of, where
Right.
we allow this, and I don't want to be that school that does that.
Any other comments from the board? Okay, hearing none. Next item up is the closing.
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call?
To adjourn at 7:19 PM. Kraft,
Yes.
Kieran,
Yes.
Nukin,
Yes.
Lizinski,
Yes.
Stoll.
Yes.
Adjourned.